Hello, everyone. My name's Mark Tyndall. I'm Vice President Markets and Growth Asia Pacific for Neota Logic. Welcome to the SCCA webinar today on creating a front door to the corporate legal function. I'm very excited that today I'm joined by Serena Lim. Serena, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I've been very intimate with SCCA in the past. Okay. If anyone has been a member since before 2010, you would have come across the Bizibody name. We were the outsourced secretariat for about 5 or 6 years. Unfortunately, we had to focus on our main business, which is really to enable legal teams to implement digital automation. And we have been doing that for the last 20 years. So we turned 20 this year, and we started Bizibody even before legal tech was a thing, right? So, we're really, really glad. I'm really glad that we stayed the course because now I'm talking to you and, you are virtual and we're talking about a virtual front door. I mean, we've come a long way since the days when, we weren't sure at that time whether websites were legal for lawyers and everyone was wary of emails. Okay, so, we've had a slew of government tech grants for law. That's been immense in actually getting legal tech, a lot more adoption for legal tech. And then, of course, we had, unfortunately, the pandemic, but, that inflection point, I think we've seen a great renaissance in adoption of legal tech. So a lot that we have in the last few years, had the opportunity to do, especially of late, great acceleration in adoption. Mark,
yes, well, happy 20th birthday, Serena. It's very exciting that the Bizibody business has turned 20 this year. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
From an admin, I was going to say, from an admin perspective today for the webinar, please do ask questions as we go along. We're using Zoom webinars today, so please use the Zoom webinar Q&A below. There's two separate kind of components. There's the Q&A, which it's a better place to ask your questions and we'll see them pop up. And there's also the chat if you did want to chat with other attendees here today. I thought we'd do a really quick introduction to kind of the themes or the questions that we want to explore or answer today. Serena's already given a bit of a background to it. Firstly, first point, we want to talk about what we're seeing in the market this year for corporate legal departments. Serena's going to talk a little bit about Ministry of Law, Technology and Innovation Roadmap, what that means. We're going to have a talk about some of the types of legal transformation and legal change projects that are occurring in the market in Asia Pacific. We're going to talk about some of the key starting points to those projects. Where are people starting that journey? And it's probably no surprise, it's in the title of the webinar. We're talking about creating that streamlined interface between the business and the legal capability as a starting point. Secondly, we'll be talking about the benefits of creating that type of front door to your legal capability. And thirdly, importantly, we're going to talk about how you might get started on that journey. So they're the kind of three things we're hoping to look at today. Serena, you were already talking a bit about who Bizibody is. We might do an introduction to who we are as businesses as well as people. Did you want to run through anything else on the Bizibody side of what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk a little bit about our automation portfolio. So in the last few years, we've been doing a lot of tech. We started with very bespoke tech, and for those, our famous projects would be LawNet and Justice Online. At that time, bespoke really, law firms and legal departments would not have been able to afford it. So we then brought in off-the-counter OTCs, off-the-counter point apps. So you've got a lot of acronyms here: practice management systems, PMS, document management systems, DMS, case management systems, CMS, CRM, client relationship management. My personal favorite is document automation, and we've been doing that actually for more than 12 years, 12 years. And that, that's something that we'll be looking at a little bit today. We try not to invent where there is already solution. So a lot of times we look around the world to see, what is good, and then we curate it, test it, and implement it, right? And that's how we've got together with Neota Logic. Theirs is not quite, OTC point apps. They go into the no-code platform partners, and which means that you can do a lot with the platform, not just one thing. So, with this, we have the opportunity not just to curate, but to also reimagine, help you to reimagine, sit with you, what would it look like if you brought in technology, because now you can shape the technology to suit you. But, what works on paper, digitalization is not just what works on paper, digitize it. You get great opportunities to actually reimagine and redesign your whole workflows. We also do a lot of training, and that is both human training as well as we've done robots as well. So we've trained robots for work that is really repetitive, like on block sales. So we've actually used software robots, and we've trained them. And the last bit, which is really important, and is integration. And today, you don't work in a vacuum, right? Even for law firms, you need to interact with many systems, internally as well as externally. So externally could be filing systems, research systems, or search systems. A lot of the government departments have got APIs, and we expect to see more with MinLaw's involvement now. So integration is a key part, making systems work. We have got, law firms, legal institutions, legal departments that we work with. Latest on board is actually MinLaw. So we've had a couple of meetings with MinLaw, even though they only came in about, 2-3 weeks ago. And so legal tech used to be kind of taken care of by SAL, the Singapore's it's Academy of Law. But now it's actually gone up around, and it's now at a ministerial level, and they see it as a long-term play. So it's TIR 2030. Right now they are feeling the ground, and you might get a chance to discuss your needs with them. Our role has always been, the ministries and SAL and LawSoc have always found us a really good resource to finding out, what people on the ground need, right? So they will then, in the past, they've actually done some curation. They've also then provided some funding. And they will come up with perhaps some sort of framework for you to sort of landmark to see where you are at in this legal tech journey. Okay, so it's a framework that you can then measure yourself against your peers, as well as what other people are doing and where you can head towards. So I think that's going to be a nice piece. And in the same way that Singapore became, the third world's largest arbitration center, this is where we're headed. Legal technology has been identified as a key area for Singapore in terms of not just legal tech adoption, but legal tech creation. So exciting times indeed for us and everybody involved in legal. So our core business today to digitize, to help you digitize, and not just to replace the paper with tech, but to then, in order to get you to digitize and to get buy-in, you need to get a lot more advantages and a lot more benefits from going tech. Otherwise, why bother changing the way that you work? So digitize and harness to also automate the repetitive workflow so that you can do the higher value work and meet that mantra that you hear all the time of doing more for less, and of course to then also integrate with other systems. Okay, so really look forward to sharing Neota Logic with you, because it's one of those technologies that really helps to automate businesses and legal departments and law firms.
Thanks, Serena. That's great. And it's a very exciting time thinking about Singapore as a leading market in the legal tech space. It's just a standout for the region and globally, which is of course really exciting for us to be working with you and working with the team in Singapore. I thought I'd do a quick introduction to Neota Logic as a company, but also as a technology platform before we dive into kind of the case study today, which is the front door to the corporate legal function. So a quick introduction to Neota Logic. We're a market leader. We're not a startup. We were founded in 2010, and we've got a really strong track record globally of working with partners, working with corporate legal departments, law firms, insurance companies, a whole range of brands, which we won't have time to talk about today, to deliver some really powerful solutions. We pride ourselves on being the only no-code platform globally that combines these three capabilities to a depth and enterprise depth: expertise automation, process or workflow automation, and document automation. And we'll run through what those are really quickly in a second. We're a global company. We're headquartered in New York City. We've got an office here in Melbourne. We've got a great team here in Australia that supports our Asia Pacific customers. So including Singapore, Australia itself, New Zealand, Japan, thinking Hong Kong. And we are really excited about the work and the growing community that we have in Asia Pacific. So I've got well over 3,000 enterprise applications deployed, and there's well over 10,000 kind of authors or creators of applications. Of course, there are many more end users of those applications over time. These are the three capabilities at a high level that we just talked about. I'll run through them really briefly just to set the scene. So the three core pillars of the Neota Logic platform: expert advisors, taking facts inputs from users through a web-based questionnaire usually, taking inputs from databases, other data sources, say a SharePoint list, might be a SQL database or something like that, or no code integration, and applying complex logic, business rules, policy, law to those facts to give the user an outcome. So this is big in compliance, it's big in due diligence, risk detection, big in mergers and acquisitions, compliance generally. A lot of self-help tools fall into this category of expert advisors, where routine legal expertise that usually takes 15 or 20 minutes to dispense on the telephone or by a 30-minute email, for example, can be codified or recorded in rules in an application in Neota Logic and made available to business users 24/7. So you're no longer having those 20, 30-minute calls for the routine work that churns up your team's time. There's intelligent workflow, this second pillar, and I think this is just one of the superpowers of the Neota Logic platform, along with the other two. But it's taking a complex business process, legal process, and streamlining that using Neota Logic. Essentially, you can take a complex process, map out all the key actors, all the actions they need to take, the information they need, the data they need, and present that to them for decisions whenever they need it. Generate documents and have those triaged to someone else for approval through an execution request framework, for example. It's really big workflow in routing, eligibility screening, wherever you need more than one person, more than one touch point, more than one point in time connected by data. You use intelligent workflow, and we'll look at an example of that today. And document automation. So you will have seen this before. It's using user inputs and business rules, combine those to select the right Word document template, and then draft that template in an automated way to the user's very specific circumstances. So of course, it's really big in contract automation, big in the procurement space, big in corporate legal teams who are using it to allow business users to self-serve, with the corporate legal team knowing exactly what risk profile is represented in that document without even having to kind of touch it or look at it. spend time on it. So that's where Neota Logic sits kind of in the world and in the market. Okay, so maybe we set the scene now a bit about the legal change. We're kind of getting into the substance of what we said we'd talk about today. And it's setting the scene. What's happening this year in transformation? What are corporate legal teams actually doing that we've seen in Asia Pacific? We've seen a number of large-scale transformation projects continue or even commence this year, despite the operational or the budgetary uncertainties that have occurred in 2020. And this has happened in financial services, mining and resources, consumer retail. Now, I also do speak to a lot of leaders of corporate legal departments every week who are not in the middle of a big transformation project. And this year, those discussions have been usually focused around starting the process of designing new legal services. So redesigning existing services, or just simply streamlining existing processes, including triaging and routing matters, or triaging and routing requests for advice, contract reviews, things like that. Also extracting and codifying expertise, like we talked about, into self-help tools and document automation. Now, when I talk to a lot of corporate counsel, including corporate counsel from some of the largest listed companies in the region, they pretty regularly say, oh, we're so far behind with this type of capability. But I'm really not sure that that's the right lens through which we should view this challenge. And I think the real opportunity, or the real kind of challenge and opportunity, we should look at a different way. Firstly, this year has been a significant challenge for corporate legal departments throughout the region. They've had to lead their teams through really significant change in how they work as a team, how they deliver their service very practically. The problems scoping up and the problems that they need to solve have changed. And they've actually been very creative and effective in rolling out technology and adopting technology, particularly in the collaboration space. So use of Microsoft Teams, Office 365 generally, Microsoft 365 has been really powerful. You can see here a discussion we had at our community conference, user conference recently, and our friends from Transform Data talked about the absolute explosion in the use of Microsoft Teams for legal. And they also talked about all the kind of really interesting integration work that they've done with Neota Logic. So embedding kind of contract automation in SharePoint sites and things like that. So there's been some really creative work going on. There's also been these significant pressures from COVID-19 specific use cases. So stream leasing in the leasing space, employment, contract disputes, workplace safety, and that's created large volumes of work, some of it repetitive and straightforward, but that work becomes a real burden on legal teams, particularly in the kind of top-heavy, more experience-heavy legal teams. I won't go on about the challenges for too much longer because I feel like it's a bit of a downer on 2020, but there also hasn't been a large appetite for investment this year. So you will have been forced to have been quite creative with lean budgets on average, and you might have identified key areas for improvement, including triaging and routing legal matters. But you do require some type of investment in technology often to make that change. You might have your IT team telling you that you need to kind of either get in line for resources or that you need to join them in a far more detailed, longer term investigation of the technology you already have. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great idea to do that. But what we're seeing on repeat somewhat this year is that takes 6 to 12 months to materialize. And often corporate legal teams are finding themselves back in where they started, which is the validation that they don't have the tools that they need to get started and to get some of these benefits, and that they do need to make an investment in technology. So takeaway for today is, let's think about the benefits of automating legal processes, expertise, and documents. A very well recognized starting place is that interface between the legal function and your key business clients. Serena, would you like to run us through some of the benefits of introducing or building on this front door to the corporate legal function? You're on mute, so I can't hear you.
Thanks. Okay. So the legal front door is where the business unit, will now post their requests, as opposed to telephone, emails, meet you in the hallway and say, right, hey, you know, can you advise me on this or that? So this gives them a structure, and it's a smart structure. You know, they say we need a contract. The system then asks them, you know, what sort of contract, and it's the Q&A interface. And at the end, you get all the information that you need, including the documents. They get, you know, also prompted to think about the information that they need to supply you. So it certainly is, you know, a much more efficient way of getting instructions, because a lot of time you will find that instructions, you know, they're laypersons, so they don't really know what you need. So instructions come in, it's incomplete, it's, you know, requires a lot of to and froing. So you do away with that. You also get them to think about, you know, whether they really need you, because, you know, in order to get to you, they now need to give you a bit more information than what they might otherwise have, you know, and then after 3 rounds, they find that, oh, actually, I didn't really need you. So this is like a guided, you know, way for them to come to you. And because the front door could then say, right, okay, what you need is a license agreement, so self-help guided automation to create that document. Okay, so you put your smarts into the system. And you know, it's efficient because you now have replicated yourself really and your smarts, and you know, only if it gets too hairy then it gets escalated back to you. Okay, but a lot of times in the projects that we've done, a large percentage of documents are very cookie cutter, and which you shouldn't be, you know, which can be automated. So we've done things like front doors for different types of licensing agreements. NDAs is, of course, probably the most popular thing in the world to automate. And then with a guided escalation for legal review. So with that, all of this, you know, although it's efficient, but it's also coming in a data structure. So with that, you can do data analytics. It can actually, you can analyze what's coming in. You can be sure that nothing falls through the gap because, you know, didn't read an email, or, you know, email was read and then forgotten about. It can actually also then be routed to the person in the team that is the best person to be doing this. And especially now with the fact that we're all working from disparate locations, this becomes really, really useful. So it doesn't have to be channeled to one person and that person then, you know, filters it out and routes it to the right person. And yet, as a supervisor, you could actually see what's happening in the team, right? So your increased visibility of legal service requests enables better prioritization and assignment of resources. And then moving forward, you will know, right, okay, you have, you know, the system is actually counting for you how many of this sort of documents that you get, maybe it's time to automate them, or what is, you know, it gives you an idea of what is worth automating, what is not worth automating further, what, you know, might be difficult but doesn't come in a lot, right? What might be easy but comes in a lot, you know, that's the sort of thing that you really want to automate. We had a client where, you know, legal had well, the policy was that legal had to vet through every document that went out, and yet legal could not increase headcount. So the only way they could do this was to put their smarts into the document. Legal had vetted the template. So, you know, this was government department, and they made the argument that it's enough for legal to automate to vet the template because the template has got the smarts of legal. And, you know, they were then able to manage a lot better once they took that route. For the business units, you know, they love it because faster turnaround, don't have to deal with lawyers unnecessarily, and, you know, no bottlenecking, okay? So everybody's happy. Management is happy because deal flow is faster, again, no bottlenecking, And, you know, if you need to then increase your head count and to justify your existence, it's in the analytics, what you've been doing. Because a lot of times, you know, we also forget that we've actually done all these things. So now it's all captured, don't have to go through the emails. It's all in the system that you can then plan better for the future. Okay. So I think those are the things which are the main drivers. Mark, anything else that you see?
Yeah, I mean, the data piece is the thing that stands out to me so regularly. And when we're talking to teams sort of thinking about automation or have implemented it, and we can look at that, an example in a moment, really the ability to track, understand, report, and empower decision-making, but also justification of resourcing requests and resourcing decisions, which can make a real difference to your team. That's where I think the really pointy end of it, where people actually start to see that transformational change. It's not just in minor efficiency improvements, it's in actually having actionable data and decisions that are empowered by data to actually make some pretty substantial change for the better for your team. So we might look at in practice, what does this look like? I mean, I can introduce you to our legal services request template solution. This is one that you just get off the shelf and can configure whatever way you like, in a very straightforward way as a customer of Neota Logic. So this is the runtime experience. It's themed, in a Neota Logic theme, but your corporate kind of theme can be very easily applied to this. And what this allows you to do is take off the shelf a legal services request workflow and series of applications. And again, configure this for your particular needs. You can see that a user has spent, in a pretty quick sense, they've spent 30 seconds filling out this form. And what that does is create structured data. It creates a request that can be triaged by the legal team. Now, in this case, it's surfaced as an email and a clickable link for this particular request that's come through. And again, totally configurable how the legal team or another legal operations kind of manager might look at this and approve it or reject that request for whatever reason, and then triage that to say a particular lawyer within the internal legal team, the corporate legal department, or whether it should be briefed to outside counsel for whatever reason. So you can see it's a really streamlined way off the shelf that you can just plug in and allow your business users to get started. Very simple, and very much the approach that Neota Logic is taking in providing templated solutions that you can quickly pull off the shelf and plug in and configure for your particular needs. So that is a look at a very generally, this is a relatively straightforward example of a legal services request that you can get started with straight away. And we can show you kind of how that looks in terms of how it's built or how it arrives to you off the shelf essentially, but then the interface through which you would configure that or make that your own. So what I'll introduce you to now is Neota Logic Workflow. So this is a workflow engine that comes as a part of the Neota Logic platform. Neota Logic Workflow is a BPMN aligned tool for mapping business processes, complex business processes. In this case, this is the legal services request workflow. And it allows you to really easily and powerfully create and maintain a complex workflow just using drag and drop tools. So you can drag an action onto the page, like that questionnaire application. And that questionnaire application, the one you see on the screen now, was the one you just saw. The initiating user can provide some basic details about their legal matter, about the request for advice or contract review. And that automated email is generated to the legal department assigner. So you can see how visually you can understand and map a process. Now, the benefits of using a tool like this not only come in the efficiency and the kind of streamlining effect you get from creating an automated process in this way, but you also start to open up a conversation about service design and process engineering, essentially. Once you start to document these processes in this way, not only do you get a runnable workflow, a runnable application like the one you just saw, but you also start to create the conversation of saying, is this the ideal process? Is this how we should be running or delivering our service? Who should we engage to have the conversation? And using this visual workflow as a resource, as a point of discussion. And so much value comes out of kind of mapping your workflows in this way in itself. So as I said, a lot of these rectangles here in the workflow are applications. They are means through which someone interacts with this workflow, like in the example we just saw in the form-based experience of the questionnaire you see on the screen. You can build those applications in a number of different places. You can build them in Word if they're a kind of primarily a document automation use case. You can build them in Neota Logic Canvas. We won't have time to look at Canvas today because we will be short on time. Or you can build them here in Neota Logic Studio. And this is just a basic view of the application that you just saw in the questionnaire application. So it's a very simple drag and drop series of tools. You can design all of your issue tree and all of the forms, the questions that need to sit inside that. It looks very plain on this view, but you'll notice that it was themed at runtime when it was launched for the user. Essentially, you design your corporate theme or implement your corporate theme separately to the actual form design on Neota Logic. And then once that's applied to your application, it's themed exactly as if it were your website or consistent with your branding guidelines. So very straightforward, fast way to build a form-based application to collect up information and then do whatever you need with that information as a part of a workflow. So, okay, we've built some applications. We've built a workflow to kind of link them all together to create this triaging capability. Essentially that front door, the landing place where people come to enter the information and kick off the process of getting their legal needs met or addressed by you. What does it look like to actually import this off the shelf? There's a template library in Neota Logic. You simply click on the legal services request card, and it's one click of the button. You can import this workflow and these series of applications into your Neota Logic site and get that up and running straight away. And then you have your front door to the legal function. It's really exciting because of how customizable it is. This is a template that we've talked about, but it's essentially infinitely customizable to the workflow, the steps in the process that you need to take and the data that you need to collect. It appears in your Neota Logic site. Again, this is the runtime experience of running through the application. We probably don't need to go through that too much again, but this is the product card or the workflow card that appears. We start to collect where everyone who touches this application or workflow creates structured data now. So you can see the session state here saying that a request has been commenced today or yesterday, who created it, what their request is. Now, there's some really interesting stuff you can do with that data, including, as Serena kind of outlined, some of the analytics and dashboarding capabilities. You can start to have a risk value kind of weighted matrix here telling you where the risk value kind of profile sits with the bulk of your work, which is really powerful again. So this example you see on the screen is where one of our customers has done a Power BI integration. So they're on Microsoft Shop, and they've sent that structured data from Neota Logic, from the workflow data manager, Neota Data Manager, and they've sent it into Power BI to create some really interesting one-click visualizations. So this is the stuff that empowers you to have the conversation and say, these are the business units who are providing us with most of our work. Here's the strategic alignment of these requests and this legal work with what we're doing, our mandate, and what we should be doing. It starts to empower you to have the conversation about work you should continue doing, work you should start doing, do more of, and probably most importantly, work that you should stop doing. It's the challenging conversations to have, but once empowered by data, you can be quite decisive and have those more challenging conversations about the services that aren't aligned strategically to the business and what you should really be delivering. So as I said, there's a bunch of different templates. It's not just legal services request. When we talk about this type of example today, this case study, Serena has already flagged it already. It's not just one solution. It's not just your legal services request and a data-driven kind of answer to those challenges or those problems. It's figuring out what compliance solutions could you be automating? What contract automation solutions could you automate that would give you some type of outcome in a more efficient way? We've had a question from Stephanie saying, can various templates be combined? The answer is yes. You can use what's called a document groups capability in Neota Logic to generate a whole series of contracts or output documents from a series of templates using logic and inputs from the user. They might say, I need a, ultimately, they might answer, they might not know they need a services agreement, for example, but you can triage them, collect up the information you need, apply some rules to say, this is clearly, you need an MSA and certain schedules, a purchase order, or something like that. You can then have your applications and your workflows, select those 4 templates and populate them in a dynamic way to generate those for the user as a part of that workflow. So that is definitely possible, Stephanie. You can combine templates in any way to ensure that the user's getting all of the outputs that they need for a given matter. There's a really important kind of use case there in the workflow sense. We see a lot of use cases where people use document automation solutions, but it's a very linear or just kind of one point in time experience of generating a document. The challenge is that often lawyers don't have all of the answers. They might have 40% of the answers or 50% of the answers at a given time. And if you're using a standalone document automation solution without any workflow capability, you can often generate documents that are hardly usable. They've got a lot of gaps in them. They've got a lot of alternative clauses that may have been dropped into the output document, but it's no longer a precedent. It's not readable. It's not clear how those alternative clauses should be used once that document goes offline. So the power of getting into workflow is to connect up a range of users that can say, well, one person can fill out the initial questionnaire, basic matter details. Another person, potentially a lawyer or an operations team member, can fill out some more details, and you start to get a richer and richer data set that could populate one document or a series of documents. Only when the system kind of becomes clear or confident that you've got all the answers that you need and that kind of loop can stop, then it'll generate the document and say, here it is. And legal team, here's the risk profile of this particular output without the legal team necessarily having to look at it or review it. So it's a really structured way of understanding what's going on in the business and the risk profile of all of that work and all the transactional work you're doing without needing to actually handle that work manually. So some really powerful use cases in there. Again, we've got a whole bunch of other use cases we could talk about, but we don't want to kind of labor the point too much. We've had a question asking, in the approval workflow, so the one that we can see here, can multiple levels of approvals from other departments be added in addition to the legal department? This is a second question, but I'll start with this one. The answer is definitely yes. So a very common use case on the Neota Logic platform, and as a part of these types of workflows are delegations of authority solutions. So they can be stored in the form of a table in an app, like that questionnaire app that you've seen. And what it does is apply rules, those delegations, to the transaction information. So it might be a monetary threshold. It might be whether the transaction might have some type of reputational risk, for example. And based on those parameters provided by the business user, it will triage or identify which delegation is relevant and make sure that that approval, it diverts to that individual or that delegation for that relevant approval. So this is one of the very bread and butter, like the normal things that this type of workflow capability is used for. And we use those XOR gates. You can see the kind of branching logic to show you where a process can go one way or it can go the other based on the relevant delegation of authority. So great question. The second question is the platform standalone or can it be integrated with external platforms? For example, Microsoft Office 365. Another great question. And the answer is a resounding yes. Neota Logic is designed as a platform very much. It's totally designed for integration. So very commonly we're doing SharePoint integrations all the time. So drawing data from SharePoint lists, for example, applying logic, running reasoning, running a workflow, and then writing new entries to the same SharePoint list or potentially another SharePoint list. People who use corporate legal departments who use SharePoint as a document repository. You might be generating documents, and we very regularly integrate to write documents into those SharePoint document repositories, named in a way that is appropriate for your filing, kind of your nomenclature, your filing system in SharePoint. And also to target the very particular folders that might be required, say for a particular matter or for a particular project or client. That's totally achievable, something that we do very regularly with Neota Logic applications, that integration piece. Power BI is another big one we saw before. Tableau, that's not 365, that's a separate visualization analytics platform that corporate legal departments have access to. Salesforce is a common integration. DocuSign is a very common integration. So sending documents generated in Neota out to DocuSign, bringing them back in and then say into SharePoint. So very common, not just very common to achieve those integrations, but one of the key purposes for how Neota Logic was designed and implemented. I get very excited about integrations because I think, as Serena said before, that's kind of where some of the key benefits come. A standalone, an island type solution that doesn't work with 365 or that doesn't work with your other key systems, whether that's analytics, whether it's other contract management tools as well, though you can do so much contract management in Neota Logic. If you've got SAP, we've got to do an integration with Ariba. You do that with Neota Logic to get the absolute most out of those three core pillars that we talked about. So expertise automation, complex rules, the workflow, powerful BPMN style workflow, and then powerful document automation. So if you let me run, I'll keep talking for too long. Happy to answer other questions if people might have them, noting we've got 15 minutes. Maybe Serena, so that everyone doesn't get bored of hearing my voice. Do you have anything else that jumps out at you, the benefits of doing this, or what else we could be thinking about as we wait for any more questions to come through?
Yeah, well, just to share what we have been doing in Singapore a little bit. So we've been doing some at Bizibody compliance automation with no-code software and document automation. Those would be the most popular areas. Workflow, we haven't had that many requests for, kind of approval processes, except, linked to these, the document automation bits. But certainly for compliance and document automation, those are the most popular here.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Well, we've finished largely with 15 minutes to spare. Unless anyone has any further questions, happy to conclude there. I'd say a massive thank you to SCCA for hosting the webinar today. Of course, to Serena for joining us from Bizibody. Please connect with us on LinkedIn if you'd like to make contact or send an email to us.
There's a question, Mark.
Oh, there's a question come through.
Yeah.
Is the software able to track contract deadlines and send renewal reminders? Yes, it definitely can. Thanks for that question. That's a really good question. So you can schedule reminders as a part of a workflow or an application so that any given kind of type of workflow, or one of the workflows that we looked at today, could be triggered once a contract has been, say, executed and set for a date to be have a renewal reminder generated in 6 months' time, 1 year's time, or 2 years' time, or something like that. And for that to be, dashboarded to a team or generate an email to a mailbox. Any type of kind of reminder or alert you'd like to implement can be built out on the platform in the no-code tools. So contract deadlines, you can have that so that reminders, you can have that surface that as an application itself, so that you've got kind of a dashboard that shows you what contracts are on foot and what's coming up for renewal and other deadlines, things like that. But reminders is a really powerful kind of part of the workflow capability, and on our roadmap that we're delivering. It's, again, thinking about that BPMN aligned process mapping to be able to drag in reminders straight into your workflow and have those operate straight away. So a really, really great question. Are there any other questions? You've asked some really great questions today. It's been really interesting to hear. Someone has also asked, a key problem that I have is the lag between the client and counsel. Apart from reminders, is there a way to also calculate the period of the lag? It can be a good analytics data. That's a very good point. Yes. Yes. I mean, I could even try and open up some, maybe even show you an example of that. Yes, you can simply have a calculated field in your database in one of your applications that shows when a request was kind of triaged to a certain kind of third-party counsel, outside counsel, how long the client's been holding it for. And you can be dashboarding that very easily and say, look, I can show you very clearly where the bottleneck is. And over time, it's sitting with, say, counsel for 80% of the elapsed workflow. I'm just looking if I can find a solution that would show something like that. But very common, because it's keen to tracking that status when the statuses change in terms of in whose hands they are sitting is really important. So you should be able to see here, this is a different solution. This is a document automation solution, and this is the back end. This is the database that supports it. And you can see all of these different session states where it's in an approval kind of workflow part, in the approval part of the workflow phase. In this case, it's sitting workflow to be approved by me, Mark Tyndall, and it was started 2 months ago. So we're tracking all the key touch points in terms of when it was commenced and how long it's been sitting there. I've got a whole bunch of other fields being recorded in this database. Yeah, so for example, this one's calculating the duration of the workflow. So this is a total duration, but you can add other fields essentially and visualize those that show you how long it's been sitting with a given person. And then of course you can dashboard that to show how long on average these workflows have been sitting with a given role type or with a given individual. So something that you're totally right, could be a very powerful data point to report on. There's also, yeah, I mean, we dive then into the possibilities of all the different metrics that you could be producing. And when we say metrics, we kind of mean the very actionable kind of decision driving information and data that you might be collecting. And if you have an interest in that metrics piece, I really recommend the PwC New Law report on corporate legal department metrics and measurement that they released, I think, in July this year. It's a really interesting report, a lot of which you can then implement with Neota Logic. Very good questions. Thank you. It's been really interesting to see those questions come through about data, tracking, reminders, pesky clients and counsel being the bottlenecks and how we might report on that. And of course, the document automation piece that Stephanie asked about combining or grouping or generating a series of documents based on a user's need. I
just wanted to add one more thing. So the TIR 2030, it is the first time that, in all the previous initiatives, and some of them did include grants by SAL, also getting Spring Singapore type grants. It's mostly been, the initiatives has been limited to law firms. So TIR 2030 is the first time that they've expanded it to legal departments as well. So I'll be keen to, find out, just ping me if there are sort of any sort of pain points, and you're not sure what sort of technology is available, whether it's off-the-shelf low code or, today we try not to build as much as we, and use low code or no code whenever possible. But, with my 20 years of experience, I'm sure that, we'll be able to guide you in the right way. So just feel free to, have a channel to me for any sort of pain points that you might have, that you think, right, maybe there's a technology solution for this. We've talked about, you know, the most common scenarios, but there are certainly some things which may not be so obvious that actually Neota Logic can also assist with. And, you know, I've seen it also, you know, combined with AI. So, you know, these can be very powerful combinations as well.
That's great. And I think a great way to conclude. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. Again, reach out to Serena and please feel free to engage with us if you've got any questions. I also run a weekly just drop-in webinar as well. If you've got any questions and you don't really want to schedule kind of a call or anything, please just let us know. I can send through the invite details for that weekly drop-in webinar on a Wednesday, which is a low-key kind of informal discussion where different people attend and have that type of informal discussion about automation and Neota Logic. So thanks very much to SCCA. I guess we'll hand back if there's any kind of final comments. I'll wrap up from SCCA, but thanks very much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.